peanut butter and jelly, Jack and Jill, apple pie and baseball, all things that go together beautifully. But 4,610 pounds of luxury car, specifically der neue Siebener von Bayerische Motorenwerke, on Monticello Motor Club, not exactly the first thing that comes to mind. But friends, today, we're gonna take all 4,600 pounds of German luxury onto an American racetrack. Okay, so what powers the ultimate driving machine? Well, actually, there's two engines on offer. There's a 6 and there's an 8. They're both turbocharged, but let's start with the bullets and numbers. In the 6, it's 320 horsepower that comes in at 5,200 RPM and stays flat all the way to 6,000 RPM. The torque's a different story, 330 pound-feet of torque, which comes in at a stupidly low 1,380 RPM, stays flat all the way up to 4,500 RPM. On the 8-cylinder side, 445 horsepower, which comes in at 5,500 RPM, stays flat all the way up to 6,000. The torque, 480, that comes in at an also stupidly low 1,800 RPM, stays flat all the way up to 4,500 RPM. But what's really interesting here is how they make that power. So there's a single turbo over on the 6. Here, there's two turbos. And notice the plumbing here, it sits in the V. But it's not just the turbos that derive the power. There's variable valve timing, which we've seen on cars before, but there's also a variable valve lift. So if you think about V8s like this, they generally have like a throttle body that adjusts how much air is going into the cylinder. Here, BMW can adjust how far the valve can open, so it can vary how much air is actually going into the engine. So combined with direct injection, that's how you're able to get so much power out of relatively compact engines. Now, once you get past the very odd sensation of driving a luxury car on a racetrack and doing it with your butt being cooled, you start to notice something, and that is the delivery of the pulling power. Not just the pulling power, but the delivery of the pulling power. Now, you and I drove this racetrack last year in a normally aspirated V8, and we had a hell of a good time. But here, this is a different story because we got a couple of turbos. Now, this track specifically is a 4-mile circuit. It is one of the most wonderful places in the world, but BMW has chosen to have it to 2 miles, and they gave us, very oddly, the more technical 2 miles of the track, so we don't have the super long straight. So we're demonstrating a couple things here, but the power delivery here, you would expect it'd be almost like an on-off switch. Not the case here. Like, notice I'm coming around kind of a long sweeper here, carrying some speed. Let's hit the brakes a little bit, but then I can easily apply the throttle in a situation like this, and I don't go off into those helicopters over there. So you can very easily modulate the power here, or really get on the power, and there is so much pulling power in a car that, and I've discussed this already with you guys, 4,610 pounds, but it's so easily delivered in technical situations. Not at all what you'd expect. Now, this part of our episode is not for the faint of heart, because we are going to share a naked BMW 7 Series with you. And what we have here is not so much just a naked car. This is how the car is constructed, and really one of the biggest changes, not just for the car, but for BMW as a global concern. And I know that sounds like a lot. Follow me here. So this is what's called the BMW carbon core. Now, you would think carbon core, the whole thing is made of carbon fiber, right? Actually wrong. It's a hybrid of materials. So here you've got carbon fiber. Here you've got high-strength steel. Here you have aluminum. Here you have composites. And the whole concept here is to bring together disparate materials that have different functions. So you've got very high-strength steel to dissipate energy in a crash. You've got lightweight but strong materials here, so you have less weight in places where you don't want too much weight. But most importantly, in the structural pieces of the car. This is what translates to driving dynamics. This is what makes a car handle. When a car is stiffer, a car will handle better. No matter what kind of car it is, you're going to have better driving dynamics, especially over broken pavement, railroad tracks, that kind of stuff, because you're not always driving in perfect scenarios like a racetrack like we're doing today. So carbon fiber gives you the strength, but lowers the overall mass. So what has BMW done in terms of lowering the overall mass? From last year's car to this year's car, by doing details like this, they've lowered almost 300 pounds. Now think about that. That is almost 10% of the total weight of a BMW 7 Series, so a not inconsequential amount. But really, the most important thing here, and what gets me the most excited, is not how it effectuates a BMW 7 Series, but how it effectuates BMW Global as a concern. So BMW, they came out with what? The i8 and the i3 a couple of years ago, and really, we need to look at those cars as experiments, because what they did is they took these two totally different approaches to building cars and put them under their own brand to see, number one, if people would buy them, and number two, can you make them commercially viable? Now that's what you see outwardly, but what you don't see, or what you may know if you're really into cars, is BMW is not only putting carbon fiber in experimental cars like the i8 and the i3, now into production, serial production vehicles. They're doing it because they have their own carbon fiber factory. Let me repeat that. BMW, they're not buying this from a supplier. They don't have some like special weave type like rotisserie thing like Yaguchi-san has somewhere deep within Lexus. They have their entire factory devoted just to making carbon fiber in the state of Washington. And the entire purpose of that is to make carbon fiber a viable alternative in series production cars. Now this is a racetrack, so obviously we need to talk about driving dynamics. And that's where this is a very odd scenario, because this is a luxury car. I keep on saying this because it's very hard to wrap my brain around what we're doing today. But really, this is a luxury car on a diet. We've talked about that carbon core thing, and this is where it kind of comes home to roost, is there's this weight reduction. It's about 300 pounds in total over the old car. But really what BMW has done here is gone through everything, not just the core, like even the ball bearings. So like you Fletch fans out there, it's literally, it's all ball bearings these days. They like shaved down the total mass of the ball bearings to make the overall car lighter. So when you expect to drive a car like this around a track and literally end up in those tires over there, you don't, because there isn't the lean you would expect in any way, shape, or form. And that is a complete function of the lower mass, but specifically where the mass is placed. Now, we're not even spend our time getting into the suspension geometry and the physics of it, because at the end of the day, BMW, I actually used to work for them back in university. I learned very much early on that that's what they do, is driving dynamics. So when we turned up in New York yesterday, BMW gave us this whole history of the 7 Series, and I found out some stuff even I didn't know. Like, for example, this 7 Series, it was the first car to have a navigation system with a moving map. This one here, the first one to have stability control and an integrated telephone. And then there's this one here, which is kind of like near and dear to my heart. This is the first ever 7 Series, and I didn't, I knew this, but it didn't really register. The 7 Series is like a baby. It's only been around since 1977. But then there's this very one here that I love so much because it has a stick. BMW's stock and trade since the early 70s is the ultimate driving machine. And actually, as an aside, if you want to hear an interesting story of how that term came to being, Bob Lutz was on our show a couple of years ago, told the whole story, Freude am Fahren auf Deutsch, the ultimate driving machine in English. Check that out. But I digress. Cars like these, you expect them to be imperceptible shifts and you don't really care how fast they are. Well, really, there's a couple of things that went into this. Number one, the balance between a fast shift, but a shift that you can't detect. So again, we're going around a very technical track here, and I've let the car deliberately do the shifting for me, and there's virtually no instance where I feel like I can sense the shift. Yeah, if I put my foot into it, yeah, I'm definitely going to feel a shift there, but it's more a function of the power, not so much the transmission giving me a thunk. And the second thing about this transmission is it's now connected to the nav system. So you and I already kind of experienced this, but not something with the BMW logo, but it came from the BMW group. Remember that Ghost 2, the new one we just drove? That one has the transmission that is connected to the nav system, and the whole idea is for the car to understand what's coming up and prepare the transmission for the shift. Now, to be very honest with you, I haven't taken this car on the street. I mean, would you, if you had a track open all day and tires and gas? You probably wouldn't. So we'll come back to this. We'll get the car in California and spend more time fooling around with it in town and in the canyons. But for the most part, the big thing about the transmission, it is a balance like I haven't seen in cars like this before. Like when you look at the S-Class that we've driven, when you get into the DCTs that are in like the V8 twin turbos, the shift, you can definitely tell that those things are shifting a little harder, unlike what you would get in, say, like the S550, like with a torque converter, or even the 12-cylinder Mercedes, where it's a super smooth shift. You don't really have a balance in either one of those transmissions. Here, you do, and I'm kind of surprised how well it works. Okay, I know we're very excited about the racetrack, but we're still talking about a luxury car here. So, might as well assume the position here. This is the executive package we are in, so we've got the full-length console, which I absolutely love, the seat in the chauffeur position here, and a little tablet here to control different functions within the car. For example, the sun protection setting, I can actually close all of the different blinds here with literally one setting. It's kind of like super cool, like having my own movie theater. I can open everything here. I can also just close the rear blind if I want. And while we're kind of talking about some of this stuff, notice, I don't know if you guys can see this in here, notice there's like a pattern in the glass here. I know I asked you guys in a Rolls-Royce episode, which would you rather have, a sunroof or the LED lighting package? Well, here you don't need to choose because they've got this, it's called the Sky Lounge LED package, where there's little LEDs in there, and as the light comes through, it actually illuminates in the color. And check this out, you won't be able to see it in the daylight, but you can change the color. So for example, if I want it to be blue, I can change it to blue. If I want it to be red or green, I can change it to any one of those colors. Very neat touch at night. And then while we're on lighting, you see this thing here, it almost looks like a floodlight here. And this is two functions. You can turn the light on to kind of give you some mood lighting, make things more romantic if you need to. But the second function, think about this, is to cover the rubber strip from the door. Very neat little function. Now this little tablet here, this thing here, it controls all of this stuff, like even the seats. Like I know you guys can see here, there's this adjuster for the back seats, but I can also adjust the seat from here. I can adjust heat, cool, massage, everything from this little tablet thing here, which actually is made by Samsung, not by BMW. So it's actually an operating system and functionality that you already know. And then beyond the lights, this thing is like command central. I can get driving information. I can go to the different apps within the car. But then some of the more, I guess, pedestrian things in a car like this is the sound system. Notice this is the Bowers & Wilkins, and it is stunning. We've seen this system before in a Volvo. Here it's to another level with more speakers and power. I think it's like 1400 watts. But the coolest thing about this, the speaker cones, they're actually made of Kevlar. But last but not least, put aside all this little technology here. Look at the seats themselves. Like the diamond quilt stitch pattern, even this detail here throughout the seat. And then this pillow back here. I would say, if I didn't know better, it almost gives BMW's own Rolls-Royce a run for their money. So you and I have been spending a hell of a lot of time here trying to wrap our brains around a luxury car on a racetrack. Driving dynamics, pulling power, transmissions with navigation control. But now let's talk luxury cars, and I'm going to try something that you shouldn't try on racetracks, so kids, don't try this at home. Let's play with the infotainment system. Way back in, 2002, BMW invented something called iDrive, and everyone hated it. And over the past, 13 years, They have perfected it to the point where it actually works. People now like it, but things have changed. Like things like iPhones and Androids and tablets have been invented. So now BMW has kind of taken some of the stuff from that and built it into here. Like, for example, you don't just have to use this little controller here or the main menu here. You can actually touch the screen now. And you can go to Connected Drive. I can go to BMW Assist. I can go to the main menu directly from the screen here or the button down here. But really, BMW, hey, they innovative company. They own their own carbon fiber factory. So they decided to leapfrog old Steve and Android and all that kind of stuff and bring you gesture controls. So what are gesture controls? You can control some of the functions here, limited function, by moving your hands around. So let's say for the sake of discussion, we go to the radio here. I want to go to the satellite radio. I'm going to keep the volume down for reasons of legal clearance. But really what's interesting here is you can use the gestures to control the radio. Notice, I literally, like a magic wand, like Harry Potter himself, can just dial back the volume. It's not just volume, you can actually change the radio stations with a 2-finger salute, really. So I can go like this. So Dusty Springfield, Bruce, I'm in a car from a company that's based in New Jersey in the US, and it's Bruce Springsteen. And what's funny about this, it's kind of like this gesture thing wasn't invented in Munich, it was invented in like New Jersey. So I can kind of like point at the thing and say, oh, I'm gonna go back to the blend like this. Or I don't want the Elvis Presley, I'm gonna go back to the love like this. But oh, Red Bank, New Jersey, I had a bad memory in the Red Bank, so let's go to limited edition. So it didn't want to work. Oh, you know what, Cheap Trick, I like those Hello Kitties. How about we go to Elvis? We'll do this again. And sometimes it doesn't work perfectly, so we're gonna try it again. Oh, Pearl Jam. I like me some Pearl Jam. But in essence, it's a new way to interact with your car. And there's even, you can take the 2-finger salute and you can memorize a function that you use over and over again. Like, for example, you can memorize your home function. Like, you can point with a 2-finger salute and say, you know what, I want to go home. Well, in this case, it came to Jimmy Buffett because it's not programmed. But you get it. It's like, forget about it. I'm going to give you the old 2-finger salute in the German kind of New Jersey way. And I'm going to try this Pearl Dynasty 2. And I want to go with the magic like this. And how about we go, oh, I don't want me some Facebook. So how about this? Santana, you know what? We'll stick on this Santana. We like this Santana guy. Black Magic Woman down in the shore, good summer back in like, what, '02. So in summary, what do we got? Well, we actually have 2 things here. The first is not a surprise. It's a BMW like any other BMW luxury car that has come before it. A performance luxury car with performance being the emphasis. But really the second thing, and what's surprising to me here, it's the tech. And it's not just tech for the sake of tech, but it's the approach in which the vehicle is built and the way in which you interact with it. And really take apart all of the disparate bits we covered here. It's an important car, not just for the vehicle itself, but the group behind it. Like, for example, taking the construction method here of carbon fiber from a laboratory on wheels like an i8 or an i3 and applying it to a series production vehicle, that is a huge step forward and more than just a unique selling proposition. But then there's also the interaction pieces. So I know what you guys are going to be asking here. What would I choose, the S-Class or this? And really, it's not that simple because it's a function of priorities. What are your priorities in choosing a car like this? Is it performance? Or is it luxury? Or is it things like a carbon fiber core or using gestures to control your radio system? So I'm going to turn the question around to you guys. Not so much which car would you choose, but what are your priorities? Why would you choose a car like this? Is it the construction method? Is it some of the detailing we've shown throughout the episodes here? Or is it the interaction with the vehicle? Let me know in the comments below or via our social media, Motoman TV all one word, Motoman TV all one word, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And until the next time that we feature another vehicle from Bayerische Motorenwerke, I say, tschüss.